Consider this, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
And in that instant, lives were changed forever.
I hope I never go through anything like this ever again.
More than 200 officers scoured through Westroads Mall just minutes after bullets started flying.
There was Christmas music playing, which was kind of eerily juxtaposed against a fire alarm that somebody had pulled.
In what's estimated to be just under 2 minutes, 8 innocent people were dead inside Von Maur. Others hid inside clothes racks and bathrooms.
It was just a terrible feeling.
Terrible feelings that can play out in many different ways. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, forgiveness. Joining us to talk more about it are Fred Wilson, a Von Maur shooting survivor, and Father Jeff Molnar. Father Molnar is the chaplain at Scott Catholic High School and resident priest at St. Patrick's Parish in Gretna. Thanks to the two of you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Fred, I want to start with you. It's been more than 7 years since this incident. What do you still remember most about that day?
How quickly one's life can change. One just went to work and some ones didn't go home at the end of that workday. I was blessed to have survived, to have lived, but it was a stark moment of realizing that one's life can be gone in an instant. Absolutely. And the plans that one has for one's life can be altered.
Take us back, Fred, to life, your life, before this shooting. What was that like?
I was living a very blessed life then. I had taught at the secondary level for 25 years and left secondary education to work in retail, and I was most blessed to have found the Von Maur Company, and I had been working there at Von Maur primarily in customer service, having started in men's furnishings, but after 1 year in men's furnishings, I was asked to go to customer service as supervisor. So I was supervisor of the customer service department.
Wow, now tell us, how do we go from education to retail? Talk about that trend. That's a pretty big deal.
It was.
Yeah.
I think life is short, and as we well know, life passes quickly. And if you're in a position to have a variety of experiences within reason, I think you need to embrace those opportunities. As I said, I had taught for many years, but I also took some years out in the early 80s to work in radio. So I had that teaching experience, the broadcasting experience, as well as then a number of years in retail.
Wow, very interesting. Tell us about the environment from your perspective at Von Maur. Those from the outside looking in, it's a retail store, right? But what was it like to actually work with the folks there?
It was a beautiful experience. The space itself shouts beauty and elegance, what with the antiques and the grand piano and the way the store, the various floors are laid out. But the people probably provided the most beauty in that there was that family feeling not only within the department but within the store. So there was familial interaction among the many departments within the store. And then, of course, there was the linkage with the Von Maur family out of Davenport, Iowa. And they, of course, impressed the community, not only with the store coming to Omaha in 1995, but the Von Maur family impressing the community as they handled the tragedy of 2007.
Yeah, let's go back there, Fred, to December 5th of 2007. Just another day, you walk in and what?
Well, my work shift on that day was from 12:30 to the store's closing that evening at 9. And it was the holiday season. It was midday. Midday is when those who work outside the home use that hour, that lunch hour, for shopping purposes. So that time of day can be extra busy. And you may recall the President of the United States had been in Omaha that day. So I think the city was more active than it even might have been, but it was busy, and so that first hour passed quickly. And around 1:30, the new store manager, Maggie Webb, she was only 24 years of age, and she was one of the 6 Von Maur employees to die. She was visiting with a floor manager there close to the customer service department. She left to go and help out with the busyness of that time of day, to allow other employees to take their lunches. And with that leaving, I visited with that floor manager briefly, and then we heard the sound of gunfire. And we knew it was gunfire. But I had always thought that working on the 3rd floor, that was a safer position to be in. That danger perhaps lurked closer to the street. That danger would be found on 1st floor, but this was this danger was moving its way up from 1st floor to 2nd, and then eventually to 3rd.
Yeah, danger reaches you.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And then what do you remember about that, Fred?
Well, I remember my colleagues telling me to get down, and that someone was shooting, and I did get down. I hid, and I looked out into the store, and I saw a young man, and for a brief time I questioned why he was not hiding, why he wasn't taking shelter, and that there was someone shooting in the store. And then I realized he was the gunman, and he was making his way in the direction of customer service. He moved around sporadically. As a result of that sporadic movement, I changed my hiding location, and then there was a point when I realized I was not hidden so well. I'm sure by this time the likes of Maggie Webb had already been shot and killed, but I had no knowledge of that, and so I think there was a naivete in my being in that moment, and realizing I was not so well hidden, I wanted to move elsewhere, and I partially stood, and that's when he fired in my direction.
Wow. So you talked about Maggie. And you didn't really know the outcome, and how could you?
No.
You know, being in the throes of all of that. Do you remember, Fred, where you were when you learned that 8 people, that their lives had been taken at that time?
I do. The injuries that I sustained took me to the Nebraska Medical Center, Nebraska Medicine now, and I was in intensive care for about 4 days, from that Wednesday afternoon until Sunday afternoon. But I came out of the anesthetics, I believe I'm correct in saying, on Friday morning, the shootings having occurred on Wednesday afternoon. I came out of the anesthetics surrounded by my family, and it was at that time that I learned that 6 of my colleagues had died, and 2 customers. I also had access to TV, so, and none of this revelation shocked me. I think there was something within me that knew that something bad had happened, something tragic had happened, and there was no reversing it. So you accept.
And Father Molnar, this, I mean, can't even imagine, being in a hospital. First of all, just the reason that he was there, but then hearing this kind of news, and that's often when we ask ourselves why, right? And that's when you come in to the picture. People seek some sort of answer from you. And listening to Fred, what's going through your mind?
Yeah, and listening to him talking, I think it shows that when we talk about forgiveness, there's a lot of little things in our lives that we tend to not so much forgive, but kind of put up with and just kind of push aside. But then there's those moments, like hearing Fred talk, when it's a life-changing, life-altering moment. And people know the answer as to why. And very often you don't have that answer. You simply can't answer why bad things happen. Fred and I were talking before the show, and I was telling him when the day it happened, I was in school out in Oregon, Benedictine monastery, kind of very much removed. And I remember seeing that scroll across the internet, probably on the internet or something, and I told him I kind of went right through the story, but then Omaha caught my eye, and then I went back. And Fred made the comment about how easy it is to do that. We almost get used to so much tragedy and so much darkness in the world. And while we may not know the answer why, we have to have an answer of what do we do about it. I don't think the world would survive without forgiveness. With every bad thing that's happened, just all throughout time, so many tragedy after tragedy. If forgiveness isn't there, I don't think the human race survives. I think anger just adds upon anger and tragedy upon tragedy until there's nothing left. But when there are people who face it, and like Fred, and there seems to be that part of the human heart that wants to heal. It doesn't want to be left in the darkness. It doesn't want to be left with the anger. And so it kind of cries out for something. And I think that's where forgiveness comes in. From a religious theological standpoint, as a Christian, we believe that's what Jesus Christ told us, to forgive our enemies. And I truly believe it's the most difficult thing we're asked to do, is to really forgive someone who has hurt us. I think we misunderstand it sometimes, a little bit, what it means. I don't think it means what happened was okay, or that it doesn't bother us, or that we don't mind. Of course it affects us. But I think it is our way of saying, I don't want to carry around that hurt. I don't want to carry around that darkness with me any longer. And I think that's what forgiveness really is.
So that is, in your opinion, the formal definition. That's how you would explain that to someone.
I think so. Forgiveness is, it's a hard thing to define, but I think, again, it's not saying I don't mind, or it's not saying I don't care. It's saying that I want to be released from the pain of it. I don't want to carry it around with me. And I think, as far as forgiveness goes, and I think Fred will talk about this, the person who offended us, the person who hurt us, I think, we ultimately have to get to a point where we want them to have some peace too. In other words, whatever caused them to do this, that's not right either. There's darkness there too that I think we ultimately want to see healed. So we are communicating that forgiveness is so important, and there are many of us who can say it, right? I forgive you, right.
But like so much else, there are steps that need to be taken, right, in order to get to that place that you're describing. And in the church, what are those steps that take us from I'm going to say it to I'm actually going to do it?
When I talk to people, the first thing I tell them is that forgiveness is it's difficult. It's not easy. Secondly, it can take a long time. It's not as simple as saying I forgive you, because some pain and some hurts run so deep. I tell some people they may spend the rest of their life trying to forgive or forgiving someone, and that's okay. It's better than the alternative. So it can take a very long time. As far as steps to go, every person's different. Every person has their own journey, their own experience of life. It's an interesting thing about pain. We can both suffer the same kind of pain, whether it's a broken arm or a broken heart. It's a unique experience to us, and so forgiveness is going to be a unique experience to the person. So the steps, I think there are some. I tell people very often, maybe the first step is saying a prayer, praying to God, asking God to help us give us the desire to forgive. Sometimes we don't even want to. And sometimes it's simply needing that desire to take that first step. So sometimes, that's sometimes like I said, the first step.
So for those people who find it really difficult, Father, because I'm sure they come back to you time and time again with, okay, I tried what you suggested and it's
Right,
not
still not
working,
working.
right? And that anger and blame just continues to build and build. Have you found a way to really cut through to those folks who you know are hurting so deeply because they're not able? And how do you
Yeah.
get them to turn the corner, right?
I sometimes, when I'm talking to them, I compare it to a wound that's healed, but it's kind of infected underneath. The scab forms over it. And sometimes the only way to heal the wound is to rip it back open, clean it from the inside out. And so sometimes, you almost have to invite people prayerfully, to revisit the pain. And what I always tell them is, when you go back to that moment when you were hurt, you go back to that moment when whatever happened, and then try to remember that you weren't alone. That, I say, Jesus was there, Christ was there. What does he say to you at that moment? What does he say to you in that moment when all this is happening? Because obviously there's going to be a lot of questions. Why didn't you stop it? Why did this happen? Why her? Why him? And to not be afraid to ask those questions, to not shy away from it, to really go down into the pain, go into the moment, again knowing that you're not doing it alone, and allow that healing to begin from the inside out.
Yeah. And Fred, I'm listening to Father, and I'm going back now to December 5th of 2007, and what a journey that had to have been for you to heal physically, right, but emotionally and spiritually and all the rest. So take us through that, if you would, just that journey in terms of steps or however you want to explain it to us. But how does that start, and does it really ever end, right, for you?
Well, I'd like to go back to Father's comment, and we well know this, but Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that's what it's all about. I spoke of not being angry, not being filled with hatred or animosity, unknowingly how that attitude would impact the community, but I was not angry. And I was filled with lightness as it related to not being burdened with that anger. I saw the Von Mauer shooter as someone who perhaps had been groomed by not having been validated as he should have been in his formative years, not having been acknowledged, not having been loved. I think the call is for us to embrace one another. There's a quotation I love, which is, each of us is an angel with one wing, and we can only fly by embracing one another. And that's what the journey is about. We need to be embracing one another, knowing that we're all a little bit inadequate, unable to fly on our own. And so that's how I felt about the Von Mauer shooter, that perhaps he was doing only what he knew to do, and that was to strike out in anger. So who was I to fault him? Who was I to blame him for just being who he was? And I, as I said, had no idea that the idea of forgiveness would be impactful. I was speaking from my heart with my brain engaged, and I'm glad that that's the approach that I've taken over the years. It's not easy. We don't hear that often enough, but it's what the world needs to hear.
Well, unfortunately, at least our community is hearing that, because I understand you do quite a bit of public speaking. And I'm curious, Fred, in the time that you're given, and we're never really given enough, especially when we're so passionate about a topic, what areas do you address? I'll ask that first. How do you set those presentations up so that you walk away knowing that you made an impact and that people, may have been moved or changed or inspired as a result of you?
I like to speak about the importance of time, the fact that we have no guarantee of a tomorrow as we are thinking of tomorrow. There is no guarantee. And as I said earlier, people just go to work. People just go to the movies. People just go to the restaurant to dine. And there's no guarantee that they'll move beyond that working or that viewing or that dining. And so we need to realize the importance of time. We need to realize and embrace the now in our lives and not let the now slip by. It may be the only time that we have to embrace. And I've also talked about change in our lives. Change is a part of everyone's life. There's a change in the weather, there's a change in health, there's a change in relationships. And if we're not able to be strong when that change occurs in our lives and accept the changes, then we're going to be a sore lot, I think. I think change of any sort requires us to be strong, requires us to be courageous.
Father Molnar, in listening to Fred here, I'm thinking you'd probably want to take him with you
I
about
do.
any place that you would go, correct?
Certainly, definitely, yeah. Everything, it's interesting, he mentioned he taught in a high school as well, and I really liked the way he tied that into the shooter. And I think what he was saying and what I've noticed is the biggest problem with not just youth but people that are struggling is that desire for love that's not being met. And it happens in those formative years, like he said, it leads someone to that. But there's also people like Fred, I'm not to embarrass him, but that give the opposite story, that show a heart that's focused on love and a heart that's full of love can't help but to give it out. And so to hear him talk about forgiveness and, like I said, the two pieces of advice to live in the now, it's good to look forward to the future, it's great to be ambitious, it's good to have goals, but nothing is as important as what you're doing right now, who you're with right now. And then also when change does come, to embrace it, because it does. Change comes in all sorts of ways. And like you said, a life-altering experience like this, you could have changed any number of ways. I've never met you before, but I think it's strengthened the love. I mean, just from what I'm hearing, it's strengthened the kindness and the compassion, and that's there's nothing more beautiful than that.
That's what I believe happens in adversity. If your heart is open to the blessings that are a part of adversity, then your life will grow. Your life will be blessed beyond how you ever knew it before the adversity. So we need to be open heart-wise to these blessings and embrace them and not be too consumed with the adversity.
Fred, what's the most commonly asked question that you get when people, just to see you, I would think that some people wouldn't know who you are, right? But when they know who you are and what you've been through, what do they want to know? What's the biggest thing?
That's a tough question. I would say, there's concern about how life has changed. I used to be right-handed, and now I'm left-handed, so the writing has been impacted. The dining has been impacted. Driving, life is different, but I want to say again that life is richer. It is richer. I have a greater appreciation naturally for having survived, but I'm richer in knowing that I'm so very, very blessed, and I thank God every day for that.
I would say it's safe to say we're all richer for knowing you, right? And, Father, I want to go back to some things that the two of you have said. You don't wake up one day, right? And this is your attitude. You're inspired by others. And Fred, I need to ask you, in your lifetime, who has been your biggest inspiration and why? Who helped shape you into the human being that you are?
I'm glad I was brought up in the church, so I would say that my parents and my grandparents were a big part of that, and that allowed me to be strong as it related to 2007. So it wasn't as if I experienced the Von Maur shootings without that background. I would say my upbringing in the church, and then I think my relationship with the church is even stronger and more today than it ever has been.
Okay, now you talk about the importance of realizing time, right? And how we don't have as much of it as maybe we'd like to think. What is there left in your life that you want to make sure that you do or accomplish or experience right before all is said and done?
Well, I've recently retired, so in that regard, I have many things I'd like to do and hope to do. Travel would be one of them. In attending the Flower Festival at St. Cecilia's a couple of weeks ago, in their program they had a quote from Mark Twain, and he said in one of his books that travel is fatal to prejudice and bigotry and so forth, that when we travel, we grow and we become more accepting.
And when we read too, because I've
Yes.
learned that you have a great book that you want to suggest to people. We want to put that graphic up for folks so
Surely.
that they can see what this book is all about. It's called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tipping. And Father, we have maybe 20 seconds. Final thoughts from you.
Well, you talk about inspiring stories, and this is, I think, a story that people need to hear, because it's the answer.
Okay. Fred, Father, thank you so much for being here. Great program.
Thank
You
you.
are truly an inspiration, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information can be found at unotv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or email us at considerthis@tvmail.unomaha.edu.